She thought she'd buried the past. But when jealousy turns into obsession, there's no burying what comes next. 19-year-old Clara Dalton once called them family. Her brother, his wife, their 2 children. Then one night, she called them something else. When the fire trucks arrived, the house was already gone. And what they found inside shattered even the most hardened investigators. Because this wasn't random, it wasn't impulsive, it was personal. And when the truth finally came out, when the judge looked her dead in the eyes, his voice didn't rise, it broke. You took everything from them. Before we show you how jealousy turned into murder, make sure you're subscribed, turn on that notification bell, and comment below where you're watching from, because this is one story you'll never forget. This story is fictional and created to highlight real-life lessons about justice, choices, and consequences. The first snow of the season had just started to fall over Brookhaven, a quiet Pennsylvania suburb where porches glowed faintly through the cold dusk. Most families were inside now, gathered for dinner or winding down from the week. Inside one of those homes, laughter drifted from the dining table, the kind that sounds easy and genuine until you listen closely and hear the tiny cracks beneath. Emily Dalton sat at the head of the table, pouring cranberry juice for her 2 sons. The boys, Liam and Evan, were small bundles of energy, one with frosting still smeared across his cheek from helping decorate the cupcakes. Her husband Aaron sat beside her, relaxed in a way that came only after years of routine. The scene was domestic perfection until the knock came. Aaron frowned. Expecting anyone? Emily shook her head. Not at this hour. The knock came again, lighter this time. When Emily opened the door, the porch light caught a familiar face. Pale from the cold, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Clara Dalton, 19, Aaron's younger sister. It had been months since they'd seen her, maybe longer. Hey, Emily said, forcing a polite smile. This is a surprise. Clara stood with a small paper bag clutched to her chest. I was in the neighborhood, she said softly. I thought I'd stop by. Her voice carried something strange, too calm, too rehearsed. Emily hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course. Come in. Inside, warmth and light greeted her. The smell of roasted chicken and cinnamon candles filled the air, the kind of comfort Clara hadn't felt in a long time. She noticed the family photos on the wall, Aaron holding his boys, when Emily beaming beside them, a portrait of domestic happiness. It hit like a physical ache. Sit, Emily said, motioning to the dining table. We still have dessert. Clara sat quietly, hands folded. Liam leaned toward her with innocent curiosity. Aunt Clara, do you still draw pictures? Her lips twitched. Not much lately. Emily cut her a slice of cake, careful to be kind. There had always been an unspoken tension between them, something Aaron never fully understood. But Emily tried. She always did. Still, the conversation faltered. Clara commented on how big the boys had gotten. Emily mentioned Aaron's promotion at the firm. Then the talk turned to Clara's life. School, work, anything at all. I left my job, Clara said finally, eyes lowered. Hours got cut. Couldn't afford the rent anymore. I'm sorry, Emily said gently. Things will turn around. But then she added, maybe without thinking, You're young, Clara. You'll figure it out. Not everyone gets things handed to them right away. The words landed sharper than intended. Clara looked up slowly. Handed to them? Emily sighed, softening. I just mean, you're still starting out. Clara smiled thinly. Right, starting out. She glanced toward Aaron, who was carrying the boys upstairs. His voice echoed faintly down the hallway. Light, happy, the same warmth she remembered from years ago when he'd been hers, back before everything changed. When Aaron disappeared upstairs, the silence between the 2 women stretched. Emily began clearing plates. Clara stood to help, but Emily waved her off. Don't worry about it. You're a guest. Clara's tone sharpened. You don't have to pretend to like me. You know. Emily froze mid-step, a plate still in her hand. I didn't say I didn't like you. You didn't have to, Clara said quietly. You took everything. My brother, my best friend, my life. You don't even see it. Emily set the plate down carefully. Aaron is my husband, Clara. You were kids. Whatever you thought that was. Clara's voice broke into a whisper. It was real. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Then Emily exhaled, tired. Look, I don't want to fight. You're family. But sometimes you have to let go of old dreams. We all do. She turned toward the sink, and under her breath, too low to sound cruel, but just loud enough to be heard, she muttered, Some people just can't stand seeing others succeed. Poor people always need someone to blame. The words hung there. Heavy, poisonous. Clara's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. She picked up her coat, her voice soft and flat. Thanks for dinner. And she walked out into the snow, leaving the warmth behind. For 3 days after that dinner, Clara Dalton didn't leave her apartment. The small studio above the laundromat smelled faintly of detergent and damp concrete. She sat by the window most nights, watching headlights pass on the icy street below, headlights that reminded her of people who had somewhere to go. She didn't, not anymore. On her cracked phone screen, Clara replayed fragments of that night at her brother's house. Emily's bright smile, the children's laughter, Aaron's quiet contentment, and then those 4 words, spoken so casually it almost didn't feel real. You poor people always need someone to blame. They played in her head on a loop until it no longer sounded like an insult. It sounded like a prophecy. By the 3rd night, Clara had stopped sleeping. She opened her laptop and scrolled through social media, landing, inevitably, on Emily Dalton's profile. Pictures of vacations, a new kitchen remodel. The caption, "Grateful for everything we've built." Clara stared at it for a long time. Her reflection in the dim glow looked hollow, like someone who'd already disappeared. When she finally did step outside, she didn't go to work or to the store. She walked 3 miles in the cold to the old park where she and Aaron used to meet as teenagers, back when he still looked at her like she mattered. He'd loved her once, she was sure of it, before college, before Emily. The wind cut across the frozen pond, scattering dry leaves across the cracked path. Clara sat on a bench, pulled her coat tight, and whispered to no one. If she hadn't taken him, everything would be different. It sounded childish, but the longer she said it, the more it began to sound like truth. 2 days later, she saw Emily again, by accident. Clara had gone downtown to cash a paycheck from her old job, barely enough to cover rent. She was standing outside the grocery store when she saw Emily's SUV pull into the parking lot. She was laughing on the phone, her coat expensive, her nails perfect, her life untouched. Clara froze. Emily spotted her. For a moment, her expression flickered, a mix of surprise and pity. Then she smiled, small and polite, the way you smile at someone you're trying not to feel sorry for. "Clara!" "Hey!" she called, walking over. Clara forced a nod. "Hi." Emily glanced at the grocery bags in Clara's arms, then at her shoes, old sneakers with frayed laces. "How have you been?" Aaron said. "You've been working a lot." "Trying to," Clara replied flatly. Emily hesitated, her tone softening. "Listen, I hope the other night didn't come out wrong. I didn't mean anything by what I said." Clara said nothing. Emily sighed, tucking her hair behind her ear. "You know, if you ever need help, Aaron and I could—" "Help me?" Clara interrupted. Emily blinked. "Well, yeah, just until you get back on your feet." The laugh that escaped Clara's throat was small and bitter. "You already took everything I ever had. I think you've done enough." Emily frowned. "Clara, that's not fair." "Fair?" Clara stepped closer. "You think any of this is fair? You got him, you got the house, the family, the money. What's left for me?" People in the parking lot began glancing over. Emily kept her voice low. "You need to calm down." "Don't tell me what I need," Clara hissed. "You don't get to act like the good one when you built your whole life out of what was mine." Emily's patience cracked. Her next words were quiet but sharp as glass. "Grow up, Clara. Aaron was never yours. And honestly, this jealousy thing, it's pathetic." The silence that followed was long and raw. Clara's jaw clenched. "You'll regret saying that." Emily shook her head, exasperated. "You need help." Then she turned and walked away, her heels crunching against the snow-dusted pavement. Clara stood there until she was gone. Her hands were shaking, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm. You took everything from them. Now I'll take everything from you. After that confrontation in the grocery store parking lot, something inside Clara Dalton stopped breaking and started hardening. It wasn't rage anymore, not grief, just a cold, deliberate certainty. She woke up the next morning to the sound of pipes rattling in the walls and thought, I can't keep living like this. The radiator hissed in the corner, leaking warmth she couldn't afford. The air smelled of iron and mildew. Rent was 3 weeks overdue. Her boss had stopped answering texts, and her landlord had left a final notice taped to the door. Meanwhile, Emily was posting pictures from a ski trip in Vermont. Clara scrolled through each one, staring at the smiles. Aaron's arm around her shoulder, the kids bundled in new coats, a caption that read, "The best part of life is family." By the time she locked her phone, the idea had already taken root. It didn't arrive as a violent thought, but as a calm decision, like something she'd been planning all along without realizing. The first step was routine. She started watching. At dusk, she would walk past the Dalton house, pretending to check her phone or wait for a ride. She memorized their patterns. Aaron left for work around 8:30 a.m. Emily dropped the kids at daycare, then came home by 9:15. On Thursdays, she went jogging. On Fridays, she stayed in to clean and make dinner. Friday, that would be it. The night before, Clara sat at her small table, scribbling notes in a torn notebook. Kids asleep by 8:30. Aaron gone until late. Back door lock loose. Saw it at dinner. She drew a tiny square, labeling it kitchen window. That would be her entry point. Then she wrote one final line at the bottom of the page. Make it look like a robbery. 2 days before the plan, Clara pawned her mother's old bracelet for $80. With the cash, she bought a set of black gloves, a hoodie, and a small flashlight from a hardware store on the edge of town. The cashier asked if she needed batteries. Clara smiled faintly. No, just one night's worth. That evening, she went to the house one last time, just to be sure. Through the window, she could see the faint glow of a TV in the living room. Emily was on the couch, Liam asleep on her lap, a cartoon still playing. It was almost tender, almost human. Clara felt her throat tighten, but the feeling didn't last. It twisted into something colder. She gets to have everything, Clara thought. She gets to be loved. The next morning, she began clearing traces of herself. Deleted messages, wiped call logs, threw away the clothes she'd worn the day of their argument. Then she found something buried at the back of her drawer, an old photo from years ago. She and Aaron, maybe 16, sitting by the lake after a school dance. His hand was in hers. The memory hit like a bruise. She tore the photo down the middle and kept only his half. The final preparation came Thursday night. She packed a small canvas tote, gloves, flashlight, an empty jewelry pouch, and a kitchen knife wrapped in a dish towel. She placed the bag beside her bed and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heartbeat slow and steady. When dawn came, she made herself tea, dressed in plain jeans and a dark jacket, and stared into the bathroom mirror. Her reflection didn't look dangerous, just ordinary, but her eyes were fixed flat, like she'd already stepped outside of herself. That afternoon, she texted Aaron, Clara, "Hey, I'm sorry for how I acted the other day." Aaron, "It's okay. I know things have been tough." Clara, "I might stop by tomorrow night to drop off the kids' presents." A pause. Aaron, "Sure. Emily's home. I'll be at the office late." She smiled faintly, almost grateful. He'd made it easy. When night fell on Friday, Claire's apartment was spotless. Nothing left out of place. No clues, no letters, no second thoughts. Outside, snow drifted against the windows. She zipped up her jacket, slid the knife into the tote, and whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer, "You took everything from me, and it's time I take something back." Then she stepped into the cold. The snow had stopped. leaving a faint crust of ice over the sidewalks that cracked under Clara Dalton's boots as she walked. It was just after 8:40 p.m., late enough that the neighborhood had gone still, early enough that lights still burned in living rooms. She'd left her car parked 2 streets away, not wanting the sound of an engine to draw attention. The air was brittle cold, each breath turning to vapor before fading into the dark. When she reached Aaron and Emily Dalton's home, the curtains were drawn, but the faint flicker of a television glowed behind them. The house looked peaceful. Too peaceful. She lingered by the mailbox, waiting. At 8:52, a small shadow passed one of the windows. Emily. Then another, smaller figure followed. Liam, dragging a blanket, whining about bedtime. Clara knew what that looked like. She used to picture it, the perfect little family routine she thought she'd have one day. Instead, she was standing outside in the cold, staring at what had been hers. She waited another half hour, counting her own heartbeats. When all the lights except one went dark, she moved. The back door lock gave almost no resistance. The same one she'd noticed was loose at dinner. She slipped inside, quiet as her own thoughts. The smell hit first: cinnamon candles, laundry soap, and warmth. It was almost welcoming. Then the silence settled. Heavy, thick, alive with its own sound. She moved through the kitchen, her flashlight beam a thin white thread in the dark. The knife stayed tucked in her jacket pocket. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Then a soft voice. Emily's. Liam. Did you get up again? Clara froze, her breath catching. Emily's footsteps moved down the hallway. A light flicked on, faint yellow, spilling through the stairwell. She appeared at the top of the stairs, robe loosely tied, hair messy with sleep. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. Then Emily's eyes widened. Clara? I needed to talk to you, Clara said, her voice low, trembling but steady. Are you out of your mind? Emily hissed, glancing toward the boys' room. It's the middle of the night. I said I needed to talk. Emily descended halfway down the stairs, one hand gripping the railing. You can't just break into people's homes. What do you want? The words came out colder than Clara expected. You took everything from me. Emily sighed, weary, not frightened. Clara, we've been over this. Aaron made his choice. You were kids. It wasn't about him, Clara said. It was about me. You took my life. You made sure I stayed small while you climbed out. You got everything. The house, the money, the love. Stop it, Emily said, sharper now. You can't blame me for your mistakes. You had the same choices. You called me poor people. Emily blinked, taken aback. Clara, I didn't. Yes, you did. Clara's voice dropped, shaking with quiet rage. You said it like I was dirt, like I didn't deserve to breathe the same air as you. Clara, don't say my name like you care. The silence between them stretched, fragile and dangerous. Then Emily made the mistake of turning her head slightly, her voice softening. You need help. Let me call. The sound that followed wasn't loud, more like a dull thud of something heavy hitting wood. Emily stumbled backwards, slipping on the step, collapsing halfway down. Her hand reached out, blood blooming across her palm from a shallow cut. Clara stood frozen, the knife trembling in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes unfocused. From upstairs came the faint, sleepy voice of a child. Mommy? Clara's gaze flicked upward. The hallway light glowed behind 2 small shadows. Liam rubbed his eyes. Mommy, what's... Clara's breath hitched. Go back to bed, she whispered. But Liam's voice rose, panic spreading. Mommy! And something inside her snapped. Not from rage this time, but from the realization that she couldn't undo what she'd already started. The neighbors wouldn't call the police for another hour, not until they saw the smoke. By then, the house on Brookhaven Drive was burning slow and silent, its flames low but deliberate, fed by the gasoline she'd found in the garage. Clara walked away in her hoodie, her breath visible in the cold, her steps careful not to leave a trail. In her pocket, Her phone buzzed once. A text from Aaron. Aaron, just finished up at the office. Everything okay at home? She stared at it for a long moment, then turned the phone off. The sound of sirens began somewhere behind her. Distant at first, then rising. She didn't look back. By sunrise, the quiet cul-de-sac on Brookhaven Drive no longer looked like the neighborhood it had been the night before. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind. A fire truck idled with its lights still turning, painting the snow in red and blue. Detective Laura Keene arrived just after 7 o'clock a.m., coffee untouched in her hand. She'd been with the department 15 years, but even she paused at the sight of the blackened house. Smoke still rose in thin white curls from the roof, curling into the pale winter sky. The first firefighter she spoke to shook his head. Fire started in the living room. Accelerant used. But they were already gone before it spread. He didn't need to clarify what gone meant. Inside, the heat had left a thick, bitter smell. Half smoke, half something worse. In the living room, Emily Dalton's body lay near the stairs, partially covered by a fire blanket. There was dried blood on the floorboards where she'd fallen. In the hallway beyond, 2 small figures under separate sheets. 5-year-old Liam. 3-year-old Evan. Detective Keene had seen plenty of crime scenes. Domestic violence, overdoses, accidents. But the sight of children's shoes melted into the carpet still made her throat close. She stood in silence for a full minute before speaking. Let's start at the door, she said quietly, then work inward. The fire marshal's report came in quickly. Gasoline residue under the couch and near the curtains. A half-empty container in the garage with prints wiped clean. Point of origin, deliberate ignition. Arson, but post-mortem. That detail told Keene more than any confession could. Whoever had done this hadn't wanted to destroy the bodies, only to erase the truth. On the kitchen counter, the forensic team found a half-burned dish towel streaked with diluted blood. Under the sink, a broken mug, still wet. Not a robbery, Keene murmured. Nothing taken, nothing ransacked. She moved carefully through the house, cataloging details in her notebook. No forced entry at the doors. Windows intact. Alarm system disabled manually. Victims likely knew the killer. When she reached the hallway mirror, she stopped. The reflection showed a faint streak on the glass. A small, brownish smear, like someone brushing past, with blood on their sleeve. She bent closer. Beneath it, she could just make out a faint fingerprint ridge. Bag and lift that, she told the technician. It's not the victim's height. By mid-morning, Aaron Dalton had arrived at the scene. He stood behind the police tape, face pale and blank. The officer who broke the news said later that he didn't cry. Not at first. He just stood there, hands shaking, repeating the same words under his breath. They were supposed to be safe. I told her I'd be home early. Detective Keene walked out to him, removing her gloves. Mr. Dalton, I'm so sorry for your loss. He nodded numbly, then frowned. Wait, where's Clara? Has anyone called her? Clara? Keene asked. My sister, he said. She was supposed to drop off some gifts yesterday. Emily mentioned she might stop by. The detective's pen paused over her notepad. Do you know if she did? I don't think so, he said, but his voice faltered. Why? Keene didn't answer. She didn't need to. The look on her face was enough. That afternoon, technicians retrieved the neighbor's doorbell camera footage. The timestamp, 8:41 p.m., a figure in a dark hoodie walking up to the Dalton house carrying a tote bag. At 10:12 p.m., the same figure leaving. Slower, head down, no bag in sight. Zoom and enhancement confirmed what Keene already suspected. The face wasn't clear, but the shape, the height, the gait, all unmistakable. Clara Dalton. At 4 p.m., an APB went out to locate her. Her phone pinged once off a cell tower near the old bus terminal, then went dark. By evening, an officer found her apartment door unlocked. Inside, bed made, clothes gone, computer missing, trash empty. One item on the table, a small burned photograph torn in half. It showed a younger Clara sitting by a lake beside Aaron. Half the image was missing, the side that once showed his face. Detective Keene exhaled slowly, staring at the photo under the evidence light. It wasn't rage she saw here. It was something older, a life that never happened, and the person who refused to accept it. Get her face out to the media, she said quietly. She's running, but she won't get far. They found Clara Dalton the next morning, sitting alone in the corner booth of an all-night diner 20 miles north of Brookhaven. It was 6:13 a.m. She hadn't ordered food, just coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier. Her hands were clasped around the cup like she was waiting for warmth that never came. When the officers approached, she didn't resist. She didn't even look surprised. Clara Dalton? Yes. You understand why we're here? I think so. She stood, let them cuff her, and walked out into the pale morning light. Detective Laura Keene sat across from her in the small gray interrogation room at the precinct. No shouting, no slamming of fists. Just the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights and the slow tick of a clock. Clara stared at the table. Her hair was unkempt, her face pale, but her eyes calm. Too calm. Keene set a folder down between them. Do you know why you're here, Clara? I think you already said, she replied softly. Emily. Emily and the children. A faint flinch, the first crack in her stillness. Keene didn't press yet. She opened the folder, laying out still images from the doorbell camera footage. One showed Clara arriving at 8:41 p.m. Another, leaving at 10:12. You recognize this? Keene asked. Clara nodded once. That's me. Why were you there? I wanted to talk to her. About what? She knows. Why don't you tell me? Clara's lips tightened. Because you wouldn't understand. Keene leaned back in her chair. Try me. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Clara whispered, She took everything. My brother, my life. She made me feel like nothing. Keene studied her. Not angry, not sympathetic, just observing. Clara, you went to that house with a knife. You poured gasoline in the living room. That's not about feeling like nothing. That's about making sure no one forgets you. Clara's jaw flexed. You don't know what it's like to watch someone live the life that was supposed to be yours. Is that what you think Aaron was? Yours? Her voice sharpened. He loved me first. Keene nodded slowly. You were kids. That doesn't mean it wasn't real. And Emily. Clara's expression shifted. Something like disgust flickered behind her eyes. She pretended to be kind. She made me feel welcome, like she was the bigger person. And then she called me poor people, like I was trash. So you killed her, Keene said evenly. Clara didn't look up. I stopped her. Keene opened another photo, a forensic shot of the half-burned towel, the gasoline can, and the victim's positions. Did you stop the kids too? She asked quietly. That was when Clara's composure faltered. Her hands trembled slightly on the table. Her voice broke, almost inaudible. They saw. I didn't mean to, but they saw. Keene's voice softened, but her words cut. So you silenced them. Clara pressed her palms over her face, tears finally spilling through her fingers. But even as she cried, her tone stayed distant. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I just wanted her to see me. To know. She laughed at me, said I was pathetic. You brought the knife, Keene said quietly. You knew what you were going to do. I thought maybe I'd scare her. Maybe she'd apologize. But when she said that word again, poor, She snapped her fingers. Everything went white. For nearly 2 hours, Keene let the silence do the work. When Clara spoke again, it was slower, detached. She had everything I wanted, and she never even appreciated it. The way Aaron looked at her, it used to be how he looked at me. I just wanted that back. For 1 minute. But she ruined it. Do you regret it? Keene asked. Clara's eyes lifted at last. Regret is for people who can still go home. Outside the room, Keene joined the district attorney, who had watched from behind the one-way mirror. Full confession, Keene said quietly, but no remorse, not the kind that matters. The DA nodded grimly. She'll face 3 counts of first-degree murder. We'll push for life without parole. Keene glanced back through the glass. Claire was still sitting there, motionless, staring at her own reflection. For a moment, she almost looked like a ghost. Someone caught between guilt and pride, unable to tell which was which. The next day, the interrogation room became a recording studio. A camera light blinked red in the corner as Detective Laura Keene placed a microphone on the table. "Just state your name for the record," she said. "Clara Marie Dalton," came the reply. "Age?" 19. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Clara, we're recording this voluntarily," Keene said. "You understand that?" "I do." Keene sat across from her, pen in hand, but she didn't write. She just listened. "Start from when you got to the house," she said. Clara's eyes dropped to her lap. When she spoke, her tone was detached. Not proud, not sorry, just matter of fact. "I walked 2 streets over, so no one would see my car. I waited until the lights went out. I knew Aaron wasn't home. He said he'd be at work late." She looked up, her gaze steady. "I didn't want to kill her. I really didn't. I only wanted her to understand, to look at me and see that she'd broken something that doesn't heal." Keene didn't interrupt. "When she came down the stairs," Clara continued, "she said my name like she was scolding a child. 'Clara, what are you doing here?' Like I was some kind of burden. She always talked like that, sweet but cruel underneath. I asked her why she took everything from me. She said I needed to grow up." Her mouth trembled slightly. She laughed. I don't even think she realized it, but she laughed. There was a pause. Then Clara said quietly, "That's when I picked up the knife." The recording caught a long silence after that. Just the soft whir of the camera, the faint hum of the fluorescent light. Then she went on. "She screamed once. I didn't even feel my arm move. It was like I was watching someone else do it. She fell on the stairs, and then she looked up at me like she couldn't believe it. I remember thinking, now you know what it feels like to lose everything." Her voice thinned. "And then the boys came out. I heard one of them call for her. They were just standing there, holding on to each other. I told them to go back to bed." Keene's pen finally scratched across the page. "But they didn't." Clara's eyes flickered. "No, they screamed, and I panicked. I didn't even know what I was doing anymore. I just kept thinking, they can't see this. They can't tell anyone." The next few seconds of tape were only breathing. "After it was over, I sat on the floor for a long time," Clara said at last. "The house was quiet. It didn't even feel real. I cleaned what I could. I didn't want Aaron to see the blood like that. Then I found the gasoline in the garage. I poured it on the curtains, the couch, the walls. I thought maybe if it all burned, it wouldn't matter what I'd done." "Why didn't you run right then?" Keene asked. Clara's voice was small now. "Because I didn't want it to be over yet. I wanted him to know what it felt like to lose everything, too. I wanted him to come home and see the smoke and understand." Her eyes met Keene's, hollow and unblinking. "I wanted him to hurt." By the time the confession ended, an hour had passed. When the tape clicked off, Clara leaned back in her chair, breathing shallowly. Keene studied her in silence. There were no tears, no emotion left to draw out, just a young woman whose sense of love had curdled into something unrecognizable. "You know what's going to happen next," Keene said. Clara nodded. "You'll charge me." "For 3 counts of first-degree murder." Clara smiled faintly. "Then I guess it's fair." Keene frowned. "Fair?" "I lost them first," she said simply. "Now I'll lose me." That recording, the full 62 minutes of it, would later play in court. Jurors sat frozen as Clara's voice filled the room, describing every step without tremor or plea. The prosecutor wouldn't need to raise his voice once, because by the time it ended, everyone in that courtroom understood one thing. Clara Dalton hadn't killed out of impulse. She had killed out of envy, the kind that devours whatever light it touches. 3 months later, the the state of Pennsylvania versus Clara Marie Dalton opened in the packed courtroom of Judge Eleanor Graves. The case had drawn reporters, local TV crews, and a quiet crowd that filled every bench. Outside, protesters held signs, some demanding justice for Emily and the children, others pleading leniency for the 19-year-old who lost her mind. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. Every cough, every scrape of a chair echoed off the high ceiling. Clara sat at the defense table, hands clasped, her face expressionless. Gone was the thin hoodie and tangled hair. She wore a plain gray sweater, no makeup, no jewelry. The only color came from the small blue pen mark on her wrist, a nervous habit she'd developed during pre-trial hearings. Her attorney, Mark Seaver, whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. At the opposite table, District Attorney Peter Latham organized his files with clinical precision. He'd handled dozens of murder cases, but this one was different. The victims were children. The defendant was barely an adult. Judge Graves entered, her robe brushing against the polished floor. She was known for composure and for rulings that carried moral weight beyond the law. As she settled behind the bench, silence fell. "Court is now in session," the clerk announced. "The people versus Clara Marie Dalton, charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson." Latham stood first. His opening statement was quiet, measured, the way truth sounds when it doesn't need volume. "This case is about envy that grew into obsession," he began. "A young woman convinced herself that the life her brother built with his wife was the one she deserved, and when words failed her, she chose fire." He gestured toward the evidence board, where photographs of the Dalton home, charred walls, children's toys blackened by smoke, stood beside an enlarged still from the neighbor's doorbell footage. The defendant admits she was there, admits she brought a knife, admits she lit the match. You will hear her own voice, recorded in full detail, describing how she stood over her sister-in-law and 2 children, her own family. He paused, letting the images speak. "The law will call it premeditated murder, but there's another name for it. It's called taking everything that was never yours." When the defense rose, the tone shifted. Mark Seaver approached the jury slowly, one hand resting on the table, his voice steady. "Clara Dalton is 19 years old. 19. She is not a monster. She is a broken girl who made an irreversible mistake in a moment of emotional collapse." He described her impoverished upbringing, her mother's abandonment, her attachment to her older brother, and how that bond twisted into dependence. "You will hear a confession, yes, but you will also hear pain, decades of it, pain that began long before that night. The prosecution will call it premeditation. We call it desperation." He stopped it, got up, looking toward Clara. "She doesn't deny what she did. She only asks that you understand how someone can fall so far without realizing it until it's too late." The first witnesses were forensic experts. Their testimony was methodical: DNA on the knife, accelerant patterns, timeline analysis. Then came Detective Laura Keene, her voice calm but firm, as she described the investigation and the confession. "She never asked for a lawyer," Keene told the court. "She never asked for a break. She just wanted to explain why." Latham pressed her. "And did she ever express remorse?" Keene's eyes flicked toward Clara. "No," she said softly. "Only that she felt justified." When the recording of the confession played, the courtroom changed. Reporters stopped typing, jurors leaned forward. Clara's voice filled the room, steady, almost gentle, describing every detail as if recounting a dream. Emily's family wept openly. Aaron Dalton, seated behind the prosecution table, buried his face in his hands. When the tape ended, Judge Graves called for a recess. No one spoke. The silence was louder than grief. The defense called only one witness, a clinical psychologist who testified about Clara's dependency disorder, her emotional immaturity, and her inability to separate self-worth from family attachment. But under cross-examination, Latham dismantled it piece by piece. "Doctor, does dependency excuse planning a murder for 3 days? No. Does it justify killing 2 children who could identify the attacker? No. Then what does it explain exactly? The psychologist hesitated. It explains why she couldn't bear to be forgotten. Latham turned to the jury. Exactly. She couldn't bear to be forgotten. So she made sure no one ever would. When closing arguments ended, Judge Graves recessed until the next morning for deliberation. But everyone in that room already knew what the verdict would be. Clara sat motionless as bailiffs escorted her away, her gray sweater catching the light. For the first time, she looked her brother's way. Aaron didn't meet her eyes. The next morning, the courtroom was silent, long before Judge Eleanor Graves entered. The jury had only deliberated for 4 hours the previous evening, a brief pause that told everyone what was coming. Clara Dalton sat in the same gray sweater, wrists bound loosely in front of her, eyes fixed on the polished table. Her attorney, Mark Seaver, sat beside her, his expression drawn, knowing there was little left to say. Behind the prosecution bench sat Aaron Dalton, shoulders rigid, his face hollowed by sleepless nights. He hadn't spoken publicly since the start of the trial. He hadn't looked at Clara once. Judge Graves entered. Everyone rose. When the clerk read the verdict, the words fell like hammer strikes. On the charge of first-degree murder of Emily Dalton, guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder of Liam Dalton, guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder of Evan Dalton, guilty. On the charge of arson, guilty. Each count echoed through the room. By the last one, Aaron's composure broke. He bowed his head, hand over his mouth, the sound of grief escaping despite himself. Clara didn't move. Judge Graves studied her for a long time before speaking. Miss Dalton, she began, voice steady and deliberate, this court has seen its share of tragedy, but the law is not designed for vengeance. It exists for truth and for the reckoning that follows when truth is denied. She folded her hands. You were 19 years old when you took 3 lives. The victims were your family. People who had opened their home to you, trusted you, loved you. You responded to that love with jealousy and violence. Clara's gaze didn't lift. The evidence, Graves continued, shows planning, concealment, and awareness of guilt. You were not insane. You were not coerced. You made a choice to destroy what you envied. The judge's tone remained calm, but the silence in the room deepened. You took everything from them, Miss Dalton, a wife, a mother, 2 innocent children, and in doing so, you took from this world something it can never give back. The line hung there, not shouted, but spoken with the weight of finality. Graves looked toward the gallery, where members of Emily's family clutched one another. There is no sentence harsh enough to fill the absence you've created, but the law requires that I impose one that reflects the gravity of your crimes. She turned back to Clara. For the murders of Emily Dalton, Liam Dalton, and Evan Dalton, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. These sentences will run consecutively. You will also serve 20 years of hard labor for the count of arson to be served in the state correctional facility. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and final. For a moment, the courtroom didn't move. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and the air felt thick with something between shock and exhaustion. Aaron finally stood. His hands trembled as he looked toward his sister for the first time in months. Their eyes met, a brief, hollow connection across the space that used to be family. Then he turned and walked out. Clara watched him go. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. The bailiff approached, securing her wrists. Miss Dalton, Judge Graves said quietly, the law cannot heal what you've broken. But perhaps in the stillness of years to come, you'll learn what remorse really means. Clara nodded once, expression unreadable. Maybe, she whispered. As she was led out through the side door, the gallery rose again. Not in protest, not in applause, but out of instinct. Watching the 19-year-old vanish behind steel doors felt less like justice served and more like watching another ghost join the three already gone. The snow had begun again outside the courthouse, falling softly against the windows, white, indifferent, endless. The prison gates closed with a hollow clang that seemed to echo for miles. Beyond the frost-streaked bars, Claire Dalton took her first steps into the yard of Hawthorne Correctional Facility, the place she would now call home. Not for a few years, not for a sentence that might someday end, but for life. The sky was a dull gray, low and heavy. Snow fell quietly over the razor wire and the concrete towers, softening nothing. A guard walked beside her, clipboard in hand. "Inmate Dalton, Clara Marie," he called out as they passed the checkpoint. "Sentence, life imprisonment without parole. Consecutive terms. Hard labor." The words sounded official, detached, but even he glanced sideways at her, like he couldn't quite reconcile the frail 19-year-old with the charges on his sheet. Clara said nothing. She didn't look afraid, or defiant, or even sad. Just empty. The clang of metal doors followed her down the corridor until she reached her cell. 4 concrete walls, 1 narrow cot, 1 window the size of a shoebox. Through it, she could see the faint shimmer of snow drifting down on the prison yard. She sat on the cot, her wrists still marked from the cuffs, and stared through that slit of light. Somewhere beyond those clouds was the neighborhood she'd destroyed, the house on Brookhaven Drive, now boarded up, its ashes buried under new snow. At the same time, across town, 3 white wooden crosses stood in a quiet cemetery, side by side. One for Emily Dalton, engraved with a single line, "Beloved wife, mother, and friend," and 2 smaller markers beside it, with carved angels above the names Liam and Evan. Aaron came every Sunday. He rarely stayed long, and he never brought flowers. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, lips moving silently. Sometimes he said her name, sometimes he didn't. On one of those visits, he looked down at the graves and whispered, "You were right, Emily. Some people can't stand to see others happy." Then he walked away before the cold could sting hard enough to make him stay. Inside her cell, Claire had begun keeping count. Days turned into marks on the wall. 1 for each morning, the guards called her number. But after the first year, she stopped. The tally meant nothing. The prison work detail assigned her to laundry duty, folding sheets, pressing uniforms, the same motions over and over, until her hands cracked from the steam and detergent. No one called her by her name anymore, just her number. Some nights, when the generators shut off and the corridors went dark, she could almost hear the echoes of laughter from that warm house, the clink of dishes, the sound of a child running down the hall. She would cover her ears until the noise stopped, but it never really did. Outside the walls, the world kept moving. The news cycle shifted, the cameras left, and the case that once shocked the town became another headline fading from memory. But those who'd sat in that courtroom never forgot the judge's words. Calm, final, unshakable. You took everything from them. It became the sentence that haunted even those who hadn't known the family. A reminder that envy doesn't just destroy what it touches, and it consumes the person holding it. What do you think, viewers? Was Claire driven by jealousy? Or by something darker? And should a 19-year-old ever face life without parole? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story gripped you, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss our next true justice story. Share this video with someone who believes actions don't have consequences. And as always, watch the next story appearing on your screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another case you won't forget.